We're recording, so we can. A couple of people that can't make it can catch up. So our little book, "Who Moved My Cheese?" Nice. Is it nice to read a small book this time rather than a big meaty one?
Yes.
So anybody didn't read it that cheated and watched the video? No, all read it. Brilliant. Good.
I was very lucky. The book only arrived yesterday, and I thought, oh my god, how am I going to read that? But actually, it only took about an hour. So,
yeah, it's not a big one. Even the writing in it is quite big, isn't it? So it's I sort of call these sort of toilet books. You know, you can sit on the toilet and pretty much read most of it. So good. So obviously you guys are regulars to book club, so you sort of know what we're all about. It's really to sort of read the book, give us a chance just to sort of talk about our different perspectives on it, because we read it and then somebody else reads it and sees something slightly different. The one thing, I mean, this book's been around for a long time. I think it's sold 28 million copies, so a lot of people have read it, have it, sits on the shelf, but it's always a good one, I think, to pick up and just reread, and that's why it jumped out at me after what we've been going through in the last sort of 3-4 months, that change is happening, and I find a lot of people are sort of moaning about the change, and and it does cause pain, it causes a lot of problems, but as it sort of says right at the end of the book, that the people keep life keeps moving the cheese. So that's why I thought, that's a nice one to sort of to get us into the mood of it. So our book, Spencer Johnson, I hadn't realised actually he passed away. I think 2-3 years ago, 2017. So, but he's written a number of books. Most of them, this one obviously on his own. But a lot with Ken Blanchard, so the 1 Minute Manager guy. So he co-hosted that with the 1 Minute Manager, so he's done a few books. I actually got a copy of Out of the Maze, which is the sequel to this, because I thought, I quite like that. So let's see that was his last book that he wrote, and it was he said it was partly written because of his fight with cancer. He had pancreatic cancer, and it's good actually. If you like the style of this one, then Out of the Maze is another good read. Same size. I think I've got it here. So it's just pretty much the same. It just goes on about Hawes, sort of Hem's journey, and how he escapes the maze in the end. So there's a happy ending at the end of it, which is good. So, those that haven't read it or weren't too sure, cheese is this sort of metaphor, for what I suppose what we want in life. So what? Just it'd be interesting just to sort of see from each of you. What did you sort of see about cheese for you? Did you make that relation to some things in your life, Sabrina? How did you sort of relate to the cheese metaphor?
Well, it's interesting because when I first read this, it was probably about 15-20 years ago, and we had a network marketing business then. Well, we still have, but not active. And for me then, cheese was my goals, more personal goals. And that was in a business that I was basically doing on my own and had more control of. A couple of years ago, my brother was fired from a job, and he'd had a tricky time in his previous job and was going through a really bad time. And I spotted a copy of this book in a pound store, remembered what I'd got out of it and sent it to him. And that was very much on a personal reasons. And then when Kevin suggested we read it again, I thought, great, I remember how easy it was to read and how much it related in so many different ways. Now, since I last read it, of course, I've had cancer, and I've been severely restricted in what I can do. So I'm thinking about the cheese now. Clearly, the cheese that I want for our business is for it to go on to we've had success in the last year, to increase that in the next year and go on without me and without my husband eventually. So I want the success for the business, but also for me, I still have some of those personal goals that I have got to go for. And I have to get up off my backside and make them happen.
Yeah, cool, good. Bruce, what about you?
Yeah, all the same sort of things that Sabrina was saying, really. There wasn't one thing in my mind, but yeah, I could relate to all sorts of different situations, really, where you're looking for something good to happen or looking for success. So yeah, it applies to family, work, all sorts.
Yeah, cool. Gary, what about you?
Yeah, very similar. I didn't know what to expect for the book, so I started the book with an open mind. But I think one of the good things is, like I said, because there's a metaphor, it can change to what is in your mind. So you can use the book to help with whatever change you're applying to it. So for me, I applied from like you say, the change in the markets at the current time, sort of thing. But as you read through the book, you say, okay, I can use this as a tool to apply it to something different if I look at it from a different perspective. So yeah, so initially I looked from it from a business point of view, but like Sabrina says, it's just a good tool to apply in lots of different situations.
Yeah. Andy?
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I think as I went through it, I various different aspects of life and work and what have you kind of came to mind. But yes, it's kind of widely applicable.
Yeah. And did you sort of, I mean, in the I think page just after the content, it says the four imaginary characters, sniff, scurry, hem, and haw. Did any of those sort of, you think, relate to you? It's always a difficult one to sort of say, oh yeah, I'm definitely like that one. But did you notice a bit of those characters in you?
I guess one thing that did come to mind is the fact that I guess I tend to be a little bit sort of paranoid about things in the sense of just because there's sort of good business coming in today, I'm often kind of, what about what's going to happen in 6 months, or so I suppose in that sense I kind of I haven't put away my running shoes.
Yeah. It's when I sort of first read it, it was sort of, I think at the time, I think I was definitely like more of a sniff, always looking for change. And I think in different times I can look back in my life and I've probably been all four, in certain times really resistant to change and sort of complaining that my cheese has gone and oh woe is me, and other times being a little bit more sort of disappointed but then doing something about it, and then often just running around not really sure what I'm looking for, but hoping that I'll bump into it. So I think for me it was a bit of all four, and sometimes it's catching yourself and thinking, right, okay, am I being a bit too much like this, or do I need to change in my behaviour? And so cool. So what I've done is I've tried to look at the lessons that come out of this. I mean, we could probably go through read the whole book together and pick it up, but there is quite a bit of depth in it. So the first lesson was this sort of lesson about change change happens. The cheese will move. So where do we get to? So was there? I mean, some aspects of that sort of rang true. And that sort of if we relate this to what's happened in the last few months. So what were your thoughts on that, Gary? What stood out to you around that particular lesson?
I think it's some people, they're still looking around, thinking their cheese is okay. Okay, there is change coming. I think a lot of people are resistant to it. Still thinking that potentially after all this, it's still going to be very similar to what the old normal was. I think some people are still in that mindset that everything's going to be okay. It's going to be the same when we come out of this the other side. So I think or is it just stuck in the old ways? And I can see some people with that sort of perspective still.
Yeah. And so, Bruce, Andy, do you have you noticed any? This is happening with sort of team members sometimes, that where you've got a team that you've got these. Sometimes people are sort of, they like the status quo. I know you've had to sort of move everybody back to home working, and so that was a change in itself. They couldn't be in the office, and then sometimes now they're used to being at home, and not in the office. Trying to bring them back into the office is it's hard for them again. So
we have found that. Certainly at the moment. But we ran a staff survey just recently, and most of our team are wanting to continue working from home. But I guess for us at the moment, there's no real need to return to the office. It's working well as it is. So and yeah.
And Sabrina, I mean, you guys have gone through a lot of change in the last sort of 3-4 months.
Yes, we certainly have. And I think for me, in this instance, cheese, I feel, is money. Because for the first time for 12 years, we've actually got some money in the bank account, and can, even when we've paid people, there's still some money in the bank account. And that has been a long time that coming. But I realise, especially having read this again, that it's so important that we build on the fortune that we've had this year, and actually we know that we've got to change some things still. It hasn't just happened because of what we've done. It's a combination of luck and some of the things we've done, but we've got to build on those and change a bit more and keep moving, because otherwise things will change ahead of us and we won't keep up.
I think that's that is a key thing. Sometimes our goal is to make money, or our goal is to achieve something, and then we achieve it, and then we sort of relax, we go back into that comfort zone, and things are okay. And it can, and I suppose there's an element here, I think, with some restaurant owners who have probably done quite well in the last month with this £10 meal deal, and they go, oh great, everything's back to normal, and the cheese is back, and we're okay. And come September, kids are back at school, that those incentives aren't there. What's going to happen to their trade? Are they actually actively working on keeping people coming back? So they think the cheese has come back, and then in a couple of weeks' time, the cheese has moved again. So I think that moves us on to lesson 2 then, which was, and I love that thing. Smell the cheese often, so when it's getting old. It's just a lovely phrase, that. And and notice small changes. I think this is a tough one with business owners, and when you're sort of in working in the business, is you're so busy running round that you sometimes miss those small changes, that ability to step back and just look at what's happening with our customers, what's happening with the employment market, what's happening with our competitors, and really be able to sort of captain the ship and look to where we're actually going. And if you look at this, even in the sense of the Titanic, there was a sense of invincibility. We're fine. Our ship is unsinkable, and so we don't do the basics. We don't keep an eye out on looking for icebergs. So this sort of thinking we should anticipate this change. And a little bit like sort of sniff and scurry that okay, they've got the cheese there, but if you've got it, keep looking. Just because you've had a good year, as you said, Sabrina, doesn't mean that next year is going to be a good year. So you've got to think, well, okay, what's next? And that's why this roller coaster of the business never stops. Because if it does, it might slow down a bit, but there's going to be another dip or another hill to climb. So anything out of that sort of part for you, Andy, that came out, this sort of anticipating change?
I guess when I read it, I guess I was sort of thinking about business change and things like that, and thinking about the business, and it's the business we're in is kind of is all about continuous change, really. The pace technology changes that is relentless. So there is that aspect, but also the fact that often technology can move on, and it doesn't necessarily mean that our business model changes or that sort of thing. But it is, it's interesting to think about how we can sort of keep an ear to the ground or a nose to the cheese, and look for when the business model might need updating, or when we need to move in a new direction.
I mean that is say if you're in that sort of cutting edge technology sort of sector, which is constant change. So it's and I suppose it's it's finding clients that have got that outlook as well. That they're not just sort of settled with what they've got there, or what's next. What's your industry like for that, Gary? Does it, because it's a little bit more sort of traditional? Do you think it gets a bit sort of stuck in its ways of doing things?
Yes, you're right. Yeah, it's okay. In shipping, it doesn't change. It's probably not going to change, but within the industry itself, with different companies like ourselves, especially with the next layer down. So you've got the shipping lines, and then underneath you've got the freight forwarders who work with different shipping lines, and that's chopping and changing all the time. They're the ones that we do a bit of freight forwarding, so you do have to keep your ear to the ground, keep your nose in the air for the change in the cheese sort of thing. Especially at the moment, you do have to keep an eye on everybody, both suppliers, customers, and competitors, to see what they're doing. So definitely keeping those up, sort of thing.
So, and I just flicking back, page 36. Because I like the little quotes. Page 30 was, having cheese makes you happy, but the more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. That's quite a powerful one in its own right. That certainly, if you take it outside of business, You know, there's, you know, you can apply that to so many different things. I think Sabrina, you know, that's one I want to put sort of on top of John's sort of, you know, desk. You know, the more important he thinks you know, the task he does is, the more he wants to hang on to it. So he's not delegating. You know,
Yeah, John's definitely a hem.
Yeah. So you know, this sort of our way of putting importance on things, and you see this in personal relationships as well. You know, people put, you know, high levels of importance onto things, and then they end up grabbing it too tight, and it almost drives that important thing away when it comes to other people. It might be possessions. So, you know, I've had people that you know, have a car, you know, their pride and joy in car, and then it gets damaged, and you know, they're almost sort of inconsolable. You know, it's we portray these things onto inanimate objects and potentially other people, and that sort of, then our feelings around that dictates whether we feel happy or not. And you know, because having cheese makes us happy. So, you know, if we're really happy from it, we place more importance on it, and then when it's gone or something happens to it, then we struggle. And I think that's part of his lesson was, you know, and certainly if you read, you know, the second book, you know, when he's diagnosed with, you know, a cancer that's going to kill him, he can't do anything about it. Is that realization that actually happiness is not in the cheese. You know, it's, you know, happiness is happiness. It's you can have that for anything. So I think that one was a really good one. So yeah, this anticipation of change, you know, if you know, it's almost that sort of, if it ain't broke, break it. You know, be constantly looking for, well, what's next, and that's, I think, as business owners, we have to spend time doing that. You know, we have to sort of, you know, take time out of the business, you know, and that's why we do the 90-day plans every 90 days. Right, let's look ahead. Once a year, you do the bigger picture side of things. You know, if we're not doing that, then we're running around, and then when the cheese moves, we just don't see it. It's, you know, we're reacting. I think, and you know, I think what happened back, if you remember, back in sort of February, March, when COVID was coming in, you know, a lot of our discussions were around, you know, what could the impact of this be? You know, what's going to happen? What do we need to change? And so I think most of us, you know, were ready for that. You know, whereas I know a lot of businesses that it sort of hit them, they still couldn't believe that it happened, and then they were blaming COVID and blaming the government for not changing things and doing things, and that sort of just, you know, keeps you where you are. Yeah, that's very much sort of, you know, hem sort of thinking. You know, whereas you just have to accept, look, it's happened. It is what it is. I can't control it. Therefore, I've just got to adapt. You know, and his other, you know, the next thing is, you know, if you don't change, you become extinct. You know, it's Darwinian law. You know, page 46. You know, if you don't change, you can become extinct. So, and this is really what life and what business is about. It's constantly changing. You know, the people that can not necessarily predict, but can act quickly when it does, are the ones that continue and go on to greater success. So how do we monitor change then? So what's, you know, if we're being aware of it, what are things, you know, Gary, in your industry, that you think that you can you could sort of do a little bit better to monitor the change that's going on?
That's a very good question. Like you say, change is constant, but sometimes it can be so small you miss it until it turns into something bigger. Yeah, no, for me, this is quite a difficult one. Like you say, from whichever perspective you're looking at this, so like I say, if it's personal changes, you know, it's quite simple because it's quite big to you, sort of thing. It's personal, like relationship changes or something happened to you. But from a business point of view, you know, like COVID, it's a major change. We can see it, you know. But yeah, from day to day, like you said, you have to be on top of it. You have to be out of the business to have that helicopter view to look and see what those changes are happening. So yeah, so maybe for me, I need to take a step up sometimes and look around and see what's up.
Yeah, because that's exactly, you know, it's been a bit more, you know, like sniff, you know, just sniffing around, seeing what there is. But yeah, I think you hit the nail there. Was there's sort of like two types of changes. There's the COVID instant change, and then there's a glacial change, you know, that goes very, very slowly, that you sometimes don't see until it's sort of too late. And it's a little bit like the concept of boiling the frog. Have you heard that one? So you know, COVID has been a little bit like putting a frog into a boiling pan of water. Okay, so it basically, you know, you put it in, it goes, bloody hell, this is hot, and it jumps out. So it changes quite quickly. You know, if it stays there, it knows it's going to die, so it jumps out. But if you put a frog into a cold pan of water and then boil, you know, bring it up to a boil, yeah, it'll just stay there and die. And this is, you see these changes happen. So if you look back in big business, you know, you've got, you know, Kodak, Blockbuster, you know, these business were succumbed to glacial change. You know, there wasn't one thing, it was a continual, you know, change in the marketplace, and they steadfastly resisted changing. You know, I know Sabrina used to deal with Woolworths, you know, and that was another company that did the same. You know, you've got, I mean, Debenhams, you know, Debenhams are going to be a business that's not going to be here when we come out of this, you know, and a number of other high street, you know, because change has been happening, this move to people's perception of buying stuff, and, you know, do we need all the, you know, do we need to buy stuff to make us feel good? You know, the whole planet, the waste, you know, all these things have been happening for, you know, for a number of years now, and is changing. And so these guys need to be sort of thinking about this, you know, and changing their business models. And if we're not moving out and talking about it, then that's when we just wake up one day and find, you know, the cheese has gone, and oh God, bloody hell, that's where did it go? Well, it's been disappearing for a long time. You know, as I said, you know, the cheese has been going mouldy for a long time. So, you know, you really got to think about how do we monitor this. And, you know, I think, you know, key, you know, get a coach, you know, talk about it, but in the industry as well, you know, talk to your customers, you know, talk to your suppliers, talk to your competitors. You know, there are, you know, back in when I was in horticulture, you know, we had, you know, all the growers would get together and talk about these things, you know, because you've got to see that bigger picture. You know, you sometimes you're too small when you're in the pan, you know, and it's heating up, but you don't know what's going on. So you've got to get out there and really see what's actually happening, what that change is. And sometimes it's changed for good. I mean, Sabrina, you guys, you know, in a way, a little bit of luck. The suppliers that you got involved with were online suppliers that have boomed in the lockdown.
Yes.
You know, so, you know, and those relationships are so important to see, right, which customers are driving forwards, which ones, you know, are riding the wave, which ones are falling behind, and you want to be in bed with the ones that are really driving forwards. Yeah, that's going to be the key there. So we've got to monitor it, and we've got to put things in place so that we can actually do that. Then, you know, we've got to adapt and change quickly. You know, when we do start to see it, you know, we can't mess around. You know, and I think that's, you know, testament to you guys. You know, when this happened, you know, you all move quickly. You know, things happened, so you know, you didn't just sort of sit and dwell on it. I know Sabrina, you know, we got an outside party to come in, you know, and make change. You know, to actually help with that change process. You know, don't be afraid to bring in the specialists that, you know, can actually help with that. Because if we think, you know, if you haven't gone through change before and you think you can do it, well, you know, you're probably wrong. You probably need that bit of support.
Definitely.
And certainly with this book, you know, Hem sort of comes across a lady called Hope, you know, who helps him with his change. You know, because on his own he was just going round and round in circles. So yeah, a couple of, you know, his quotes in there. You know, so what would you do if you weren't afraid? You know, page 48. And I think sometimes identifying fear is really key, because fear can sort of, you know, can come in all different shapes and sizes, and it can sort of come up on us quite slowly, and we don't really realise that we're in fear. And always remember, fear stands for false expectations appearing real. Okay, so it's part of our brain that can project into the future, and we start to visualise what's going to happen in the future, and then we create our own reality, our own belief, yeah, that has a negative outcome, which creates that fear. Okay, but like exactly the same way, what we can do is we can create a positive outcome with that visualization that gives us excitement. You know, it's exactly the same chemical process that goes on in our brains. Just one leads to a sort of a runaway situation, or a stay as we are. The other one leads to positive change, to move forwards. So, you know, sometimes it's actually finding what that fear is, confronting that fear, talking about that fear, you know, writing that fear down. So, you know, it's really looking to say, look, you know, what do you fear? You know, if change is going to happen in your industry, you know, what do you fear? And I think it was Nancy Klein was feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, there's that sort of acceptance that, you know, okay, fine, I'm scared, I don't know what's going to happen, but I've got faith that there can be a positive outcome from this. So it's that sort of ability to see it, to feel it, to accept it. You know, don't forget, these are just natural things that are going on in your body and your mind that are there to protect you. Fear is there as a protection mechanism, but often it's self-driven, and it can be it can kick in too soon. You know, it's trying to protect you from something isn't there. Think about, you know, phobias. You know, the fear of spiders. You know, yeah, it's a natural thing to protect us from nasty animals, but, you know, a spider's unlikely to kill you. It's unlikely to inflict any harm at all. But your imagination, yeah, plays tricks on you, and then creates that fear, which then drives that sort of involuntary reaction to it. So, does that, Andy, for you, what did that sort of resonate at all?
Yeah, I thought, I mean, a couple of things to that. I think it was interesting because I listened to the audiobook, and there's, I think, possibly a certain amount of introduction and post discussion in the audiobook that's not in the printed book. And one of the things in that was that the author was talking about the revisions that he'd made to the book. And one of the things that he put in a later revision was the bit about actually some fear is quite important. It's kind of, yeah, what would you do if you weren't afraid? But actually you do kind of need to think about the consequences as well. So yes, that was one thing. And another thing that occurred to me is kind of the sort of a time management technique of sort of prioritizing things on your to-do list that you least want to do. And obviously fear is a big part of that. You know, that phone call you don't want to make, or whatever it is, you get that out of the way at the beginning of the day.
And I think it is, you know, if you're constantly challenging your fears, you know, I say not being reckless, not, you know, so fears are there to protect you. That's all they are. So heed them, but accept them, and then decide what you're going to do. So some of the best training I did was, you know, when I was doing my NLP training, and you know, we had to walk across broken glass. So they break a load of bottles and they lay it out on the mat, and you have to walk barefooted along this glass, you know, one step. So we did that. Then we did the an arrow. You had to snap an arrow, so you put the point of the arrow in your neck there, and you put the other half on a wall, and then you have to push like that and snap the arrow. And then the final one is a fire walk. You have to walk across hot coals at 600 degrees centigrade, hot coals. So those are really good training, you know, in that world, to actually accept, look, you know, it's totally irrational to walk across broken glass, to walk across hot coals, to stick an arrow in your neck and then try and snap it. So you've got all these justly, rightly fears going through your head, going, shit, this is going to hurt. This is ridiculous. And then you've got to use that conscious mind, that neocortex, to actually go, okay, look, you know, rationalize it, think about it, you know, you sort of work in your own head how you're going to get through this stuff. And then you know that they wouldn't be doing things that are going to hurt you or damage you. And then you've got to have trust and that faith to actually then do that and go ahead with it. And that for me was a good, you know, lesson to challenge fears, to accept them that they're there, but then have a way to actually overcome them if you really want to. And it goes back to, you know, as you said, picking up that telephone and making that difficult call, having that meeting with that difficult employee, that you know that, you know, God, if I pick them up on that, they might leave, and if they leave, then, you know, I'm going to be a man down, then it's going to cause problems, you know. So these sort of beliefs that we have based on fears potentially will hold us back. We don't have those difficult conversations. You know, we don't let go of that person that we know that's causing us problems but brings in good revenue. You know, we don't employ that extra person because what if I take them on and then sales go down and I can't keep them? You know, there'll be fears that come up all the time that we have to challenge and we have to look to overcome. It's so important. So you know, quicker that you let go of the old cheese, you know. So you know, it is being looking for, you know, not getting stuck in that comfort zone where, you know, things are okay and then, you know, we don't move forwards and potentially they can actually go, you know. So when you move beyond fear, you feel free. You know, it really does. Once you've done it, you know, you've all done that difficult call, that difficult meeting, you know, got rid of that difficult person. And as soon as you've done it, you always feel better, don't you? You know, whenever you do something difficult, then the moment you've done it, you actually feel a sense of relief, a sense of elation. You know, and so it's remembering those times and then doing it more often, you know, and keep driving forwards. So then we move into sort of, you know, that whole thing of, you know, actual change, you know. So keep moving in new directions. So why did I just put that? So I think so sometimes it's, you know, create change, you know. And I think, you know, when you're building a team as well as the sort of the leader, it's, you know, add in, you know, even if things aren't changing, then bring some change in. Okay, because I think where your team sort of gets a little bit complacent, is doing the same thing over and over again, you know, if things aren't moving, then perhaps sometimes create some change. You know, do things differently. Have you guys done anything like that? I know Have you sort of put change in place when you didn't have to?
That's an interesting one. Whether you have to. I mean, generally, I think all the changes we've made for good reason.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've done anything that's just been for the sake of change. But I think personally, if things, for me, if things stop changing, then that almost gives me the space to think, okay, well, what can we do better?
Yeah.
And then that results in a change, and therefore there is a change.
Yeah. No, I always look back in, the business that I've worked in where I've enjoyed them the most, and those ones have always been constantly changing. The only one and to be honest, when they stopped changing is when I got bored and I left. When it wasn't new, when it wasn't exciting, I couldn't see change happening in the future. That's when I actually left. So I left accountancy because I couldn't see it was going to change. I left the FD world when the businesses were so big that the change was just slow and wasn't happening. So because I actually have always enjoyed that change, and it's why I got into doing this, because every day is different. Every client I work with is different. So that's the bit I really enjoy, is even if I'm not changing, the people around me are changing. So I get to experience that all the time. So and I think that that really comes back to this one, is if you change enough and you don't fear change, then you start to enjoy change. You actually enjoy doing new things, getting out your comfort zone, not being scared of actually jumping in and doing something else. His little line at the bottom, old beliefs do not lead you to new cheese. So that's a big part of this book. Old beliefs, you've got to keep looking at your beliefs and challenging those beliefs and moving forwards. And I think no disrespect to John, but I think that's the one John needs to do, isn't it?
You are reading my mind. I was thinking exactly of that. The trouble is, because we talked last night in the webinar about not being in the blame game, and the last thing I want to do is blame my husband. But bless him, he's a C, and he's so into detail. And the challenge we have at the moment, we have this. We've just recently changed all our software. Well, we're in the process of changing. We've changed the hardware. And we've gone on to Outlook, which we didn't use before, and we are looking at introducing more software, and it's very, very different. And whilst you look at the bigger picture, and it interlinks with a lot more other people now, it does a lot more things. It doesn't do them in the way that John, for one, thinks it should, and he's spending a lot more time dwelling on the fact that he's not got what he used to have, instead of being able to see, the sooner he lets go of the old cheese, he'll find the new, or more importantly, he will find the benefits. And it's quite difficult to change that mindset. I mean, Hoare didn't change him in the first book. And that's where we are at the moment. I know, because in actual fact, John has always wanted to do the right thing and to change things, but to change things on his terms and not the way he feels he's being led or forced to change them. And it's difficult. No one accepts it's easy, but I don't want to change just for change's sake, but where you can see that this is an exciting change that will actually benefit the company. But you just have to have faith and persuade everybody of that and hope you're right.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's it. It's very difficult to change somebody else's beliefs. You know,
Yeah.
they've got to change themselves. You know, and I think that's, you know, that's a classic with the hem and haw, that, you know, haw ends up going. You know, I've tried, but, you know, it's down to you in the end. And that's why, again, you know, that this book here then actually shows how haw actually, also hem actually works it out for himself. You know, it takes him time, but he eventually does work it out. And often, I think, sometimes leaving people behind, you know, and letting them to work it out. If you stay with them, you're just reinforcing those limiting beliefs, and that's a tough one, you know. And I've had that with, you know, sometimes family. You know, people have to leave, you know, close members of family because, you know, they're not changing and they're not moving forwards. So, you know, if you've done everything you can, then, you know, and I think, you know, to me, you know, this book, you know, if you've got young kids, you know, they should read this book. You know, I think if you can teach kids at an early age this stuff, you know, it can be so powerful for the rest of their life. You know, because I look back and, you know, in a way I was quite lucky, because I think, you know, just circumstances led me to be more of a sniff and scurry than a hem and a haw. But, you know, I know people that, you know, it's always good when you do school reunions and you go back and see, you know, schoolmates. You know, and I did one a number of years ago and went back to, you know, and they were all just, you know, hadn't changed at all. You know, doing the same thing that they did when they left school. You know, and they were still doing, you know, still in that sort of place and whinging and moaning about everything. You know, it was, you know, quite sad, really, that, you know, they hadn't, and it, you know, and I think, you know, I feel quite lucky that certain things happened to me that meant I didn't fall into that. I could have easily fallen into that, but things, you know, just worked my way that meant I didn't go down that route. So. Yeah, so it's safer to search in the maze and remain in a cheeseless situation. And I think that one's quite a bit of a life thing, that you see people that sort of are just unhappy where they are, but don't actually do anything about it. You know, and I know it's not on anymore, but the Jeremy Kyle show was a classic for that. You know. Just people sort of just think, well, why don't you just go? You know, why stay there with no cheese and be unhappy? Why not just move? But it's the fear of, you know, the unknown, the fear of the maze, the fear of the dark corners. You know, that and we go down a few and we get a bit scared and think, oh God, well, it was better where I was, and then you start reminiscing on the old way of doing things. You know, and the worst case is you find people that are like you, like that, and that's where you stay. You know, you stay in this sort of, you know, past history. You know, the cheese was long gone, but, you know, you sit there and fizzle and, you know, eventually become extinct. And, you know, I think this is a big one that you just got to accept. You know, the cheese keeps moving. You know, certainly in business, you know, it's always moving. It's just when you think you've cracked it, just when you think you've got there, you've got the perfect team. You know, I know, Keith and Helen are on the call sort of yesterday, and, you know, we've worked really hard. We've got a couple of really good people on the team, and then, you know, one of them has just said that they're leaving. You know, all that work, all that sort of getting to where you want to be, you know, to have that nice cheese, and it's all going well, suddenly the cheese has moved again. And that's why I think, you know, in business, that you've got to think about growing a business to eventually sell it. Okay, cash in the cheese, turn the cheese into cash, get your financial safety, financial security. Because if you don't, you know, the cheese will move. Yeah, it's fine if you're hungry, you want that cheese, you're chasing it, that's great. But if you're sitting there in that comfort zone and the cheese moves, then it becomes, it's what you can lose as opposed, what you're gaining. So that sort of lesson for to understand that this is it goes back to the book we talked about before, the Simon Sinek's Infinite Game. The game of business continues; it never ends. So we have to put in those milestones. We have to put in those achievements that we get to certain levels, and then we can either exit the game or we can sort of leave the game. But if you're always at the poker table, there's always a chance of losing your money. So it's building it while we enjoy it, understand it, but know that at some point we're going to have to sort of exit and get out of the maze, basically. Good. So any other sort of lessons, anything that stood out for you guys? I mean, that was the 7 lessons in the book, and that I sort of picked out. But anything else from you, Sabrina?
I'm sure there was, but it hasn't come to mind at the moment. I'm looking at my notes.
Okay, while you're doing that, Bruce,
Yeah.
what about you?
Nothing in particular. I think we've covered most things. I think as a whole, I feel I'm pretty good on the change sort of aspect. I feel I'm very much open to change. Maybe sometimes I'm thinking about changes when they're not necessary. I think all the lessons we covered today, they all make sense, and there's nothing there that sort of jumps out as a surprise to me. I think we're doing many of the right things, but clearly there's always room for improvement, and you only improve through changing. So I think always spending some time in the background, just exploring alternatives and trying to just step out of the day-to-day. That's always important, and that's something that I'm guilty of not doing.
Cool, good. Gary, what about you?
Like Bruce said, like I say, change, especially when you're running a business, it's quite usual to embrace change. Like I said, we started from two people 15 years ago to our office now, 30 odd people sort of thing. So you always have to embrace change, to change, just to improve and not stay still. I like this book because it gives you like a framework to look at change if it's a problem. So if you've got an issue, from a personal point of view or a business point of view, this gives you a framework to look at it from a different perspective. Like Bruce said, it's important to step away and look at it from a different point of view, whether it's yourself or the business or whatever issues you're encountering at the time.
Yeah. And say, when you are building teams, then definitely, get the teams to read it and talk about it in their departments. It's quite a good catalyst to get people to, because I do think, as business owners, we are very much at that sort of sniff and scurry type people anyway. We're always driving, because when I read it, I thought, I'm like that. But I think for me, it was about understanding that actually not everyone's like me, and a lot of people are more like hem and haw, and they're the ones that we need to help to actually cope with this stuff and to be able to come out of it and not get stuck. with that fear or those limiting beliefs. So, Andy?
Yeah, similar to yourself. I think I felt that, as a business owner, like you say, naturally we're quite, we tend to embrace change. We embrace some pretty major changes to get to where we are.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I did start thinking as I went through, and thought, oh, okay, well, is this a useful tool to educate others? I was in two minds about that. I think it very much depends who the others are. Certainly, the format it's in, some people could be quite skeptical about, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, some of the extra bits in the audio book were sort of, talking about, people who'd shared it with their employees and things like that. And well, it's in the book, so therefore, obviously, they had a very, very positive response from it.
Yeah.
But I did wonder, like, oh well, what would happen if we did that?
Yeah.
And yes, I'm not entirely convinced.
But then that's a fear, isn't it? There's a fear that's kicking in there of, what if we do this and it doesn't go right? Well, what if you did it and it went really well? And if it didn't go right, well, find another book.
Yeah, indeed. I guess, it depends what problem you're trying to solve. Personally, I've not encountered, major change resistance within the team, but maybe if that becomes an issue, then that's the time to revisit it.
Yeah. Cool. Sabrina, did you think of what?
Yes. Just to sort of summarise, I'm a whore. I'm not very good at. I don't look for change. But if somebody points out to me good reasons for changing, or indicates that the change will come, then I'm all for making it happen. And I think one thing I've learnt through several occasions in my life is that no matter how bad things are, if you look for the positive, if you imagine the better situation, you will get there eventually. And that's where I am at the moment. I know we'll get through all these changes, and we've got tremendous support, particularly from Kevin. And somehow, I'll take my hem with me one way or another.
Well, definitely read the second book, because there is a happy ending for hem at the end of it. So
good.
Good. So that concludes today. I hope so. I think it is a powerful little book. And it's one to remember to dig out every now and then, and certainly encourage other people to read it. I think certainly, and I think kids as well. Because it is written in that sort of style where I think they will get it more than perhaps adults. I know Andy's. My fear sometimes those really skeptical hen people will read it and then they poo-poo it because of its style, whereas you won't get that with youngsters. So a couple of dates coming up. So next book club is going to be end of September 25th, and I've chosen Patrick Lencioni's book Death by Meeting. So it's I know communication and meeting structures for a lot of us is key. I always say communication is the oil in the machine. So we've got to get that right. And again, it's another sort of story book, which is a nice style to read. It is on audio as well. If you do want to sort of get it, it's only in hardcover, but there are second-hand versions out there as well, so which are cheaper than the hardcover. So we'll be dealing with that on the 25th, and then 24th, we've got September, we've got time management. A couple of weeks' time, we've got customer service. So there are September workshops coming up then. So please do book onto those. And thank you very much for your input today, guys. Really appreciate you being on the call. It really does add a different dimension to this. I could just talk about it, but your insights is really useful, and look forward to seeing you on the next one, and have a super weekend. So take care, and see you soon.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
You
For now.
Okay. Okay. Bye bye.